C'est au tour de Sonja maintenant. We switch back to English, I think.
Yes, indeed. So thank you everyone for being here. As announced this morning, we're going to have another session with a bit of a deep dive into procurement. So why do we talk about procurement? We actually talk about it quite a lot because it makes up really a major share of the carbon footprint of basically any organization, including those providing essential services to populations, usually around 40 to 60%, sometimes even more. And also reducing procurement-related emissions is really considered costly, difficult to implement, and also often negatively impacting beneficiaries or patients. So, and the goal of my presentation today is to deconstruct a little bit this thinking and also share with you basically our approach to, like a framework on how to tackle procurement-related emissions, which I think is quite helpful. Even in reality, it might not exactly work out that way, but to have some sort of frame in mind, I think is quite helpful. Just so, what is it actually that we're talking about when we talk about procurement-related emissions? Of course, organizations buy a lot of things. But when we look at what is behind, so this is based on the LCA project, the life cycle assessment project that we performed in collaboration with ICRC and EPFL last year. So this was done on relief items, but in general, and a couple of medical items. But in general, it's really the raw material extraction and the energy used in the production phase of the product. Then, and this is quite specific to like humanitarian contexts, here the end-of-life phase is quite a high share of the impact as well because of the often missing recycling and waste treatment infrastructure. It's usually less when we're in like more Western context. It's quite specific to the humanitarian sector. But nevertheless, the transport, the packaging, for some items also the use, they all contribute to the impacts of products that we buy. I briefly mentioned it this morning, but for those that were not there, what we found in the project that there's one lever that we consider currently underutilized in our sectors. It's really the switch to low carbon energy in the production process, which alone can cut emissions by 20 to 45% when we look at until the end of the factory gate. So it's actually quite significant. For some products, I see the example of blankets where it's quite energy intensive, the production process of blankets. It's more than 40%. And then without going into details, but by combining different key levers, so for example, using recycled materials, optimizing transport, and so forth, we really saw on paper emission reductions of up to 70% are possible. So I find it's quite an encouraging message that we try to send with these results, to say there is really potential to do something on the procurement of items. So now what about this frame that I talked before? So basically we break it down into three, say, buckets. So the first, and it's great that Xavier was just before me, it's really rethinking the ways of working and only buy what is needed. And it's really directly related to, the practices in the hospital, how is the patient pathway designed, and it has a direct impact on the procurement. Because as you saw in the picture, which I think speaks for itself, you have to buy much less. And this is really the most impactful lever that you can have. And we'll get to some examples in a second step. Then secondly, work on the product, so buy alternative, more durable or more sustainable products. So here it's also really about the lifespan of the product. We also saw, before in one of the panels we said, okay, we have to look back on what we did because we created a mess. It's really going back to these, repairing products, using reusable instead of single use. Basically what the generations before us did, so we have to go back to this kind of approach. But also, it can be on environmental specifications and really working on reducing the impact on a product level. And then the third lever is on the suppliers. Does the supplier have a decarbonization strategy in place? And notably, does the supplier produce with low carbon energy, as mentioned before? And again, we just keep on repeating this message again and again. It's really important to keep in mind that often the impact is really in only a few items. So what we saw in the work with our partners, sometimes 15 to 25 products already make up around 80% of the emissions that are related to procurement. So I think it's really important to deconstruct, this huge pile when it comes to procurement. Say, okay, no, we have to start somewhere. We start with our top items. I have sort of 3 levers I can work on, and then again in practice it's going to be a bit more messy than in theory. But get started on these top items. Now we're going to go one by one, and I'd really like to give some concrete examples. On what we already see happening. So ways of working, again, really thinking for what purpose do we need this product. For example, I don't think I put it, exactly, the jerry can versus buckets example. It's not about, okay, our jerry can has this kilogram of CO2 emissions and the bucket has this kilogram of CO2 emissions. It's really, okay, I need to store 10 liters or 12 liters of water for 1 year. This is my need. And how, a bucket is going to last much longer than the jerry can. So if over the lifetime of the lifespan I look at, if I move to a bucket, then I actually reduce emissions across the whole life cycle. And here, that's why we get these impressive numbers of more than 80%. Can the same need be fulfilled differently? Is it possible to switch to reusable and long-lasting products? So, for example, the gown example, more than 80% emissions when switching to reusable gowns. So really, this is really the key lever. And Alexandre tells me I have to hurry up a little bit. So I'm going to go a bit faster. Then on the product level, I basically, I think it's quite clear to you. I just want to highlight maybe some example. So ICRC worked on their solar lamps, 50% emission reductions. It's really like only by reducing the weight of the solar lamp, making it durable, making it repairable, and yeah, you still have a solar lamp. Then switching from rice to sorghum, minus 90% emission, and UNHCR did a whole work on their relief items, saving 70,000 tons of CO2 every year. It's really quite impressive. This I switch. And then on the supplier part, I really just would like to highlight again really it's almost a low-hanging fruit, like ask for low carbon energy in the production process. I'd like to give 3 quick examples. So the NHS put in place their net zero supplier roadmap progressively over time, really making the requirements more and more stringent, focusing on requiring all suppliers to have carbon reduction plans in place. Then an example from the private sector, which is the RE100 initiative, with more than 440 companies committing to using renewable energy in their supply chain. And these companies already combined use more low carbon energy than South Korea. So really pushing it in the supply chain. And then last example, ICRC also worked on integrating criteria on low carbon energy in their selection process of offers. And then just very quickly, really focusing on the top items. We also need really practical guidance for procurement teams and operational teams to translate these theoretical findings of LCA's life cycle assessment into, what can they practically do. And then, basically get started. Do not wait for perfect data, like rough estimations are fine. And then also, please do share your learnings. We also start to do case studies. Next year when I'm presenting, I would love to share many more concrete examples of what was achieved on the procurement side and really going from the theoretical part to even more practical examples. Thank you very much.